medical practitioner. Today, you, your team of doctors and specialists work with patients to manage their metabolic conditions. Have you always been in the medical field?
So I was expelled from medical school 3 times. So
I just want to repeat that. He was expelled
that's how the
from
journey
medical
started.
school 3 times.
3 times got kicked out of med school. Yeah, I kept getting back in, so the same med school, so there's obviously a story there. It wasn't academic reasons. I was just a bit of an entrepreneur, you could say. Yeah, so jokes aside, well, that is true. I've always been in healthcare. My first startup was when I was 21. I was an undergrad at Duke at the time in biomedical engineering. Invented a device for women to do their own pap test at home, which is a very odd thing for a 21-year-old kid to be doing in college. But that was my research study, and ended up launching a company on the back of that technology, which failed because we couldn't raise enough money to get the product to market. So that was my first failure within a year. And I realized that being the nerd in the lab I wasn't in the right place. It was these, finance guys in the boardroom that were speaking a different language that at the time I didn't understand, and that were kind of governing my destiny. Because ultimately we failed not because the product itself wasn't interesting or the IP wasn't good, but we failed because they couldn't raise enough financing. So went back to school, went to medical school, business school, all this other stuff. Had a long career in consulting before becoming an entrepreneur again later in life. So my second company was a company called ŌURA Healthcare. It was based in Abu Dhabi. It was a hospital platform, nothing really that tech about it, but it grew to be a fairly substantial business. We were the largest subacute care platform in the country. Sold that to Mubadala, which is the sovereign fund of Abu Dhabi, back in 2018, and then immediately launched Glucare because once you get the itch, you have to keep building stuff. So yeah, so we've been working on Glucare since early 2019.
Can you tell us a little bit more about this big problem that we have in the Middle East, which is the diabetes rates that we have, and how are you solving this problem today?
So how many people in the audience have a family member who's diabetic? You should all come to Glucare. Okay. Look, it's a big problem. The incidence of disease is very, very high. Published data for Saudi Arabia, for example, WHO data is 19% of the adult population. That number is wrong. The actual number is probably closer to 30%. Pre-diabetics. So people, trudging their way on the journey to becoming diabetic. That number is probably between 20 to 30%. So easily more than half of the population, half of the adult population in this part of the world is metabolically dysfunctional. Layer on top of that, people who are overweight or obese and not yet pre-diabetic, and you're at easily 70% of the population, easily. US is the same. This is not just a emerging markets problem. It's also a, Western world problem. It's an everywhere problem. Why is that? I think that's probably the next important question. Why are we so metabolically dysfunctional? We've had decades and decades of innovation on every dimension of healthcare, from the drugs that we use, to the devices that we have, to the testing that we do, to the hospitals that we visit. Like every ingredient in healthcare has gotten better, yet the outcome has remained quite poor. In fact, it's getting worse, right? We are fatter and more diabetic than we've ever been in human history. And so that was the core question. When we started building this business, we had to really think deeply about first principles, foundationally, what is it that's causing this issue? And for us, it was not about any of the tech or the bells and whistles. It was actually a human engagement problem that we thought was the core issue, and that's actually what we set out to solve. I mean, was it the CGM or the ring?
It's the CGM.
Okay. So...
And actually, my next question was for you, is that how are you, I'll use my sister as an example, someone that gets overwhelmed with the data that she sees on the app. How would you target this segment, and how would your facilities and your practitioners tackle this issue?
We have a very strong view of this. Whether it's, you guys are still using the Freestyle, the Abbott? Okay, so it's not an ultra-human CGM, it's an Abbott. And that's an FDA-regulated device. So it's hard for people to understand and interpret data on their own. There's an immense amount of data that comes out of these devices. without proper context and guidance, it's not easy. So do we leave it to tech companies to translate that data for these patients? What ends up happening? I mean, look, I don't mean to get controversial on the stand here, but sometimes the insights are not actually clinically driven or evidence-based. And, you know, you guys have set a standard for the threshold of 110. Like you have an alarm at 110. There's no clinical basis whatsoever for a level to be set at 110. We all spike. Spiking your blood sugar is normal. Setting a standard that's 110, I think falsely sort of gets patients agitated or anxious, and without a clinician at the core there, it's hard to give people the proper guidance that they need. So our view on how we solve this problem is not one size fits all, and it's not one device fixes everything. I don't think there's a wearable company on earth that's going to solve healthcare or even a specific vertical within healthcare. Metabolic health is not going to get solved by Apple inventing a CGM on the watch. It's not going to get solved by a ring company. It's not going to get solved by a CGM company. It's going to get solved by the ecosystem re-architecting itself with proper incentives to drive outcomes. So the idea here is not what's the product that we're selling or what's the service that we've got. The issue that we fundamentally have is that we're not measuring outcomes and we're not paying for those outcomes. So it's more an architectural issue when we think about the core problem, why we're not as metabolically healthy as we should be. So the integrators, people who are able to take the wearable device, the CGM, your food and nutrition logging, your coach's chat history, and all the data that entire ecosystem produces, coalescing all of that, and then helping the patient make sense of it. Now, is there an AI that can do that? Not today. Not for a long while. There's no generalized intelligence that's going to take that disparate volume of data and deliver an insight that is useful and that you'll listen to.
Yep.
Like, how many times has your Apple Watch said, hey, it's time to breathe, or hey, it's time to get up and walk around? How many times do you snooze that notification? It's very easy to snooze your tech. It's not easy to snooze a human, especially if that human is your accountability partner, a health coach, or a doctor, or your loved one who's helping you on this journey. So I know we're at a tech conference, but to be a little controversial, the answer to this problem is not tech, it's human. The core issue here is a breakdown in human-to-human interaction in a clinical context and in a wellness context. Now, the tech helps enable the humans to be better versions of themselves and to help each other connect, build trust, and drive outcomes.
I guess with wearables, it has evolved so much over the last 10 years. We've seen the type of data and insights that come out of it go from counting steps, counting the steps, tell you how well you sleep or not, and now it's around glucose spikes. Now, wearables, I know we had a discussion about this a few days ago, and you had some interesting thoughts on how wearables can be integrated into your strategy in helping your patients improve their health. So where does wearables stand with Glucare.Health today?
Our view has evolved, and it continues to evolve. When we first started, we were much more bullish on the AI aspect of the service model. So I invested a ton of money in another company that was partnering with us to develop a whole host of AIs based on a proprietary wearable device that we would give to our patients to generate predictive scores and all kinds of stuff that everyone today calls ChatGPT. So we were kind of doing this 4 years ago. We discovered it wasn't that useful. So, sorry to be contrarian again, I don't find it that useful. Not yet. It's not smart enough. It's not nuanced enough. It's not reliable enough. But the wearables have improved over time. Right? When we started our journey, wearables were not as evolved as they are today. And all of the wearables, whether you're thinking about rings and watches or CGMs and other things, the manufacturers had this obtuse obsession with owning the patient. And so every single company would try to own vertically. They'd have their own app with their own data lake and their own insights. And like, if you wanted to compare your CGM data to your Fitbit data and try to correlate, it was very hard to do. because the data wasn't cohesive. And so part of our early journey was just hacking everything. So we tried to do integrations directly with these manufacturers. It was very hard, and we didn't make any progress, so we actually brute force hacked the devices in order to be able to read the data natively in our own app. So the CGM that you guys use, we hacked it. Our app can read directly from the CGM. It's not ideal. The manufacturers knew about it. They weren't terribly pleased about it, but things have come a long way. APIs have gotten better. The quality of the data has gotten better. The interoperability has gotten a lot better. And so I think you'll see that platforms will emerge that help patients unify all of this. But again, that's not the punchline. Because even if an evolved version of a ChatGPT that doesn't hallucinate and that has enough of a historical data set that it can give you an accurate, reasonably useful prediction, even if that comes to bear, that's not an effective accountability partner for a person suffering chronic illness. What tech companies miss in healthcare is that there's a whole lot of really complicated, dirty stuff that happens on the ground. There's blood tests, there's biometric measurements, there's body scans, there's liver scans, eye exams, real stuff that has to happen in person. So again, getting back to kind of the punchline is wearables are important. They're going to become increasingly more important. We will probably get to a point sooner than you think where we have implantables that are tracking your glucose and your ketones and your cortisol levels. All of this will improve. The data will become better and higher fidelity, but you're always going to need a translational engine and a human component to deliver it and make it useful, more like to drive the outcome.
All right, I've been told that I have one more question left to ask, and I think I'm going to shift the discussion towards partnerships. And we all know that partnerships come in different types and forms, and it's always a great way for two companies to complement their services. Do you have a particular partnership that you're very proud of that you'd like to share with the audience today? Ali, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so we've partnered with ŌURA, which is the other ring company that is well known. The San Francisco-based but Finnish company. I think they were the first ring company. We partnered with them for a few reasons. One, it's a great device. I've been wearing this for a long time, and there's not a single scratch on it. I think they make it out of something, indestructible. I have no idea. I think it's titanium. But more so, it's what's behind the device. The team over there fully aligned on the philosophy of closing the gap between health and wellness, using wearables in a clinical context. We were their first global clinical partner, a startup right here in the UAE, ŌURA's first clinical partner in the world. And the connection is actually not just commercial. Obviously, they're going to sell devices through us. Obviously, our patients are going to benefit from the data. But our scientific teams are connected. So I have a team that all they do is produce research papers. Every single one of my physicians has to spend 20% of her or his time conducting novel research and publishing. That's just part of the deal to work at Glucare. The ŌURA team has their own scientific research team, and now we're starting to explore things like what's the impact of sleep on glycemic control. They just 2 days ago launched a new resilience score. They launched a daytime stress score. So all of these new scores and metrics we've integrated through a deep API integration, pulling all that data, shoving it into the patient's medical record, and then making it useful from a clinical context. So we're super excited.
Congratulations on that.